Hello, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Question: are leaders born or made? Where does ambition come from? How does adversity affect the growth of leadership? Does the leader make the times, or do the times make the leader? As the impeachment train wends its way down the tracks, these questions and more seem uniquely relevant. And it is the reason why I invited historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, the author of Leadership in Turbulent Times, to discuss Donald Trump, leadership, and so much more this week on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. But we begin today with our weekly politics overview when I talk with my partner in politics, former White House correspondent Matthew Cooper. We begin. It's my birthday, darling. I'm having the day from hell. I just want you to know so far, not so good. Not so good.
I'm so sorry.
But I get to talk to you
though.
And spend some of my
Happy birthday. I'm honored to spend a few moments with you.
Oh, God, I'm so old. But you want to know something about this day, October 23rd? Do you know that on this day in 1973, then President Richard Nixon agreed to turn over the subpoenaed audio tapes to the Oval Office conversations on this very day in 1973?
That was a busy day.
Well, how funny that we're talking on this day with everything that's going on in Washington and with,
right.
and here we are all these years later and with the testimony of this ambassador, William Taylor. All I got to tell you is everything changes and nothing changes and everything stays the same. And
exactly.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
There's a lot to go through on that. Just give for those who don't know, maybe you want to just give a brief what the hell he said yesterday, what happened, and that kind of jazz.
Sure. Well, William Taylor is a career diplomat and West Point grad and Army veteran who was called out of retirement by Secretary of State Pompeo to go to Ukraine and try to work on this crazy mess over there. When he got over there, he was shocked to find that our relations with Ukraine were being held hostage, basically, by the back channel of Rudy Giuliani and a couple of other flunkies of the president who were trying to get Ukraine to launch a criminal investigation of Joe Biden. And he was outraged by it. And he gave long testimony yesterday in Congress that really, may prove to be very important. He took detailed notes, and it's clear there was a quid pro quo that the administration wasn't going to give aid to an ally that's fighting for its life against Russia unless they launched an investigation to help the president's political campaign. So it was very dramatic testimony yesterday in Congress.
And interesting in a lot of respects that kind of like got my juices going. First of all, can we just talk about this quid pro quo, which I don't have any trouble saying, and I know everybody else does. It's the word of the month. Nobody wants to get that out. The fact of the matter is, it's very lovely that they proved that there was a quid pro quo, but all of this that they're discussing, Matt, it doesn't matter. It's the deed. In other words, they didn't legally, if you will, or to make their case, they didn't really have to ever prove a quid pro quo. And it's good that they did, but that's
right.
A talking point coming out of the Republicans is my point. And it's crap because it's not necessary to what, this guy would be impeached over, which is, for doing it, not for the quid pro quo. So I wanted to make that point clear, but on a larger scale, if this had been any other time, this is so egregious to me. Maybe I'm wrong. First of all, it was money that was earmarked by Congress that he held up.
Right.
Not something you hear everybody talking about, but that's a pretty bad thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So there is that, but there's the story to me is what happened. We know he's caught, right, doing the dastardly deed. And we know that if he did it this time, he's been doing it along the way. Yeah, you have to assume the other things that maybe Mueller didn't get to investigate because he stonewalled him so badly, and Mueller took it. That's true. But I want to talk about the Republicans. I just seriously, call me naive on this very late in life birthday, but Matt, what's going on with these Republicans? That they stare at the camera and lie and lie and lie and are deceitful and do all the things that they're doing. In the face of this being so black and white. Can you help me with that?
Well, we've seen them fall in line for Trump since he came to office. I think we're starting to see some slight cracks in the armor. Yesterday, Mitch McConnell was...
I never told Trump that his conversation with Ukraine's president was innocent. I never told Trump that his conversation was
so great. So, right. There may be little cracks in the armor, but look, this has now become a familiar story. They're just, as long as Trump remains incredibly popular with Republicans, and remember, the fear of Republican politicians being primaried. It's not the general election.
Okay,
it's the primary.
Right.
Yeah. And so they're all in line with him. Now, it may crack now, but that's the way it's been.
On a scale of 1 to 10, honestly, okay, from your vantage point, you've been around the parts for a long time. How bad is this? With all that you've seen, I mean, and compare it to Nixon, which is really because, Clinton was about, a BJ. That was always ludicrous. But how bad is this, in your opinion? Or are they making too much of a mountain out of a molehill?
No, it's pretty bad. It's money. It's money to go to an ally that's fighting for its life against
our arch enemy.
Against our enemy that's long been accused of helping our president. This isn't a fight in Bangladesh, right? I mean, this is as bad as that would be, like misappropriating funds for Bangladesh. It all comes back to Russia, too. So it's bad.
Okay, so I just want to make the point. It's bad. And the reason I want to make the point it's bad is because I think so much stuff has just, gone around this president. Because I can't think of anything that he's done legitimately the entire time he's been in office. I mean, everything has a quirk to it, a gauge to it, a motive to it, nothing is clean. He doesn't do anything cleanly because he's a criminal. He's a criminal mind. Because I think what's been I don't think some people understand how really egregious, how really bad this is. And that's why I asked you that question. I see it on Twitter. I see it on Facebook. I see it on Instagram. I see a lot of, it's bad. It's a terrible thing what he did, and we I just want to stamp it over and over. Bad, 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 because I think it's getting lost in the wishy-washy people's mind. And those are his base. And speaking to that base, Matt, the thing about it is this: they can't win the Republicans with just his 38 to 40%. So I still don't get what some of these characters are holding on, as long as the numbers are good with the base. You don't know how that base is going to vote for the characters in the House who are up for re-election. Do you know what I'm saying? They may vote for Trump, but you don't know how they're going to vote for the characters. There's I'm ranting, but you know what I'm trying to say. I just don't think something's wrong here in how this is all being even looked at by the pundits.
Right. I mean, you're saying it's not rational for them to be supporting Trump. So,
well, it's not rational to be supporting him because, first of all, it's going to come back to bite him in the butt in the end. It will, because they've got him. They have him. There's no question. And they only have him after a week. Can you imagine if they continue to have these hearings and these people keep showing up now?
Oh, yeah.
What they're going to really come up with at the end, it's going to be whatever. But I also think that the conservative pundits, if you will, they're not being real either. They're not being normal. They're acting kind of wacky too. And
the pro-Trump conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look at what some of these guys are writing and women are writing, and I'm thinking of one from the Wall Street Journal, and I'm like, I said,
oh yeah, the Journal's all in with him. It's really
very bizarre. But do you remember World War II? There were a bunch of journalists who were pro-Nazi. And they actually indicted. They actually held one for treason. I can't think of her name right now. Was it Walker or something? It was a woman. And at the end, they let her go, but she was over there, in Nazi Germany, doing her thing. I keep saying to everybody, you idiots, at the end of the day, this is going to be like Hitler. You supported Hitler. You're over when it's over.
Yeah, yes, there's going to be there's a lot of room for somebody to, for people to start breaking with him.
I hope you're right.
But
like Lindsey Graham, let's talk Lindsey Graham getting on TV and saying he's going to introduce legislation condemning illegitimate House impeachment. I mean, you know what I'm calling him now, by the way? Ms. Lindsey.
Right. No, I hear. But Lindsey Graham is another one who was worried about being primaried. Who'd been very tough on Trump during the 2016 campaign, and then
came around,
and now he's he's
Matt,
on board.
Matt, he's not gonna. He's got to know at this time he's not on the right side of this story. So why do you keep digging in? I mean, that's like, you're in quicksand, and if you keep fighting the quicksand, it just pulls you in further. Why do it? That's all I'm saying. That's what the part that I can't comprehend. It is clear what's going on here. He will be impeached. What happens in the Senate is, wait, we'll have to see, but he will be impeached. So why keep digging in? Maybe I'm stupid.
And I know what you're saying. I think if you're completely craven, amoral House Republican, and it's just all about your political survival, there's a rational kind of game theory economist choice to make here about what you do, and there's a case for just sticking with them. Just take this. Just keep going.
Okay, so in your educated opinion, being been around, as I keep saying, you've been around for so long. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm 110 years old.
Give me the old voice. It's nonsensical. It's just nonsensical. I just don't get it. And Lindsey Graham, I mean, he's a horse of a whole different color, because this guy has gone from, he's like changed characters. It's like, it's not even the same Lindsey. Like, who's this person? Where did he come from? I mean, kind of thing. And we should talk Syria, because I think what happened in Syria since we've been gone is pretty bizarre too. I mean, let's look at that. On that, they broke with him. But they didn't break with him. They condemned, they screamed, they ranted, they raved on what Trump pulling out the troops and carrying on and giving. Now Mr. Putin is running Syria. I mean, come on.
Right.
Yeah. So I again, Republicans, this may go down as maybe one of the worst foreign policy blunders ever. He just turned the Middle East over to Putin.
It's pretty unbelievable.
Okay. So, knowing that, you still stick with him?
Somehow I always think I wind up on the show sounding like I'm defending Trump. I'm not defending Trump.
I know you're not.
I'm just trying to explain the minds of those who do.
Well, see, this is it. And so I think the minds are cracked. I will be the first to say it. I think the minds, there's something in that Republican Party. They are cracked. And I think that the thing that I wanted to get to in that whole thing that I just brought to you was this. I actually think we are underselling exactly what is going on in this country right now. We are not aware of just how really wacky and insidious and how controlled we're being by a Putin we are right now. I just think that it's like there are two universes going on. There's the one where Nancy is going at her own pace and she's doing her thing, and she's, and Trump does something and she responds in the same old way, and everything is, like just like it used to be. But in the background, Matt, nothing is like it used to be. We're at critical mass here. This is a constitutional crisis. This is something weird going on in who's controlling our government right now. And everybody's acting like it'll be okay.
But you must be happy she came around on impeachment, right?
Well, I don't know that she came around on impeachment. I think that what happened is they came around and said to her, "We're ready. What's wrong with you?"
Well, sure, yeah. But I mean, she did.
Well, yeah, she's she's doing her thing, and we still can't write her story because I think there's still a lot of what's going to go on with this impeachment thing hanging in the balance as to how far she'll be willing to go, what she's willing to do, whether, what card she's willing to play. My big concern with her, with her in the House is, how far did they push it to get the Senate to do what it properly needs to do? And how many secrets are there, Matt, that they don't want us to know about? People talk, the Republicans.
Wait, who's they? The Republicans?
No.
Trump?
No. Nancy. I mean, they're holding the hearings behind closed doors for a very smart reason, which is because they don't want to give anybody, the ability to sabotage it, which Trump clearly would do if he could get his hands on anything. There's partly that. But I also think there are state secrets involved in this. I think there's great concern for security that's involved in this. And I think that we don't have the whole picture. And so how much are they going to be willing to tell the American people? I mean, how much involvement does Putin really have in all of this? Because you're not going to tell me he doesn't have any.
You're being so unfair to the president.
You think?
Oh, it's always Russia with you.
What did Nancy say the other day? All roads lead back to Russia.
Yeah, she stood up.
So you're not a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not really. I think this is based on a lot of, in-depth reporting and reading and imbibing on my part. It does look fishy, doesn't it?
What exactly are we talking about? Putin's involvement in the Trump administration?
Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, whether he's a useful idiot,
or if he's compromised,
term, or he's or there's compromat or whatever.
Right.
It's been a wonderful time for the Putin administration. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, I guess the point that I've been trying to make here is that I just think that everybody's being kind of laissez-faire about it all. When I think something really, really serious is happening here, in who is controlling our foreign policy and our elections and our president. And I don't understand why everybody isn't freaking out like I'm starting to freak out. Because it's clear what's going on. I mean, let's take Putin out of it for a second. If you just go on what Trump just did in Syria with the Kurds, even just there, this guy should have been removed from office. It's not sane.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
So, explain to me why people aren't flipping their corks.
Well, as you said, even the Republicans flipped their gourds about the Syria thing.
Well, they did and they didn't because they stuck with him.
Well, impeachment's underway. I mean, why aren't people in the streets rioting? I can't answer that, but this process is well underway now.
Well,
so
something is not right in Oz. So
you're not saying the Democrats are compromised. I'm not clear where you're going.
No, I'm not. No. My problem with the Democrats is that they're not hysterical enough.
Right.
That's my argument with them. They're just not hysterical. They're just like, we'll let the process go on, and we'll. In the meantime, in the last 3 years, the process has gone on, and this guy has completely upended everything that is America. Okay?
I understand what you're saying.
They're playing by the rules, and I'm saying, tomorrow they find out that this is true, that Trump is compromised, that Putin is running the show. Tell me what they would do. Hold hearings?
I don't have an answer for you. I mean, for a long time on this show, you've said you wanted the Democrats to launch an impeachment inquiry.
And they're doing that, and that's wonderful. But things have gotten incredibly bad in the last 2 weeks. And our eyes have been opened to things we never thought we would see a president of the United States do. And I'm simply saying all roads, as Nancy said, lead back to Putin. Okay, if there is compromise or, whatever, what are you going to do about it? Because if you impeach Trump, that's not going to stop it, number one. And number two, you don't know that the Republicans are going to throw him out of office in the House. And you don't know how it looks to me like Pence is involved in all of this, by the way. He's not clean. Mr. Clean is not so clean. I'm simply saying I think something really hard is going on. I just don't see why people aren't hysterical. And maybe I'm overreacting. You tell me. I haven't had my sugar yet for my birthday.
I know what you're saying. The Dems they control the House. They're taking it at the pace they want, and
they're not worried about what they're going to find. And like I said, I don't know that we all know the whole story. So just throwing it out there that, the question of the day is if they discover that, Putin had a greater hand in all of this than one could ever have thought, what can be done?
Yeah.
So, so that I think that's a fair thing to put out on the table.
That would obviously be serious. I mean, the incredible thing about Trump is that you wouldn't really need compromise to make him do what you want. You just need to flatter him, right? Like Erdogan didn't have compromise on him.
We don't know.
Well, maybe he did. Maybe Kim Jong-un does, but I think you just need to play him.
Well, that's even worse in one way because
right.
That's just clearly that he's not normal, if you want to call. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he's more of a sucker than a.
Well, but we don't know that.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Well, we don't know. Well, we don't know what we don't know.
But that goes into the list of possibilities. But what I was focusing on, if in fact Putin is controlling all of this for whatever the hell the reason he got the control is, and they know it or they discover it, what do they do about it? And I'm saying to you, this is so major to the security of the United States. I don't know that we'll ever really know. That's there is that too. But yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I understand what you're saying.
Right. Okay. So let me take it to this. Trump, is he in trouble, or do you think he gets impeached and goes on to win a second term?
No, I think he's in trouble. I think this is a big. I'm not saying he's not going to win re-election. I don't know if he's going to win or not, but this is a big weight on him. And at some level, some people are just going to get tired of the drama. And I think it's taxing on the sort of, psychic patience of the country. And so,
well, the country, if you read the polls, are definitely, not staying.
Yeah, I think it's.
And where it counts, by the way, in the center.
When you say, is he in trouble, do I think he's going to get thrown out of office? No, I don't. But do I also know where this is all going? I don't. And I'm less certain about him finishing the term than I might have been 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and then excuse me, and then it gets back to the Republicans in the Senate, and
because I do think if they really think it's in their interest to dump them, they'll dump them.
Well, sure, I think that's always true, but what constitutes their interests? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I mean, at what point do they come back from the brink and say to themselves, if we don't dump him, goodbye Republican Party forever?
Yeah, well, that's why I look at the tea leaves of, McConnell is the ultimate, ruthless.
Well, here's something weird about McConnell I want to talk to you about. His poll numbers in Tennessee are down like 15%. So they're telling him, I'm in Kentucky. Yeah. So they're telling him, right, at home, we don't like what you're doing and we don't like your president. So what's his story, except to maybe protect, then hope that he stays in power so nobody can really look at his what he and his wife and their financial crazy. It's just like,
Well, one scandal at a time here.
it's the Republicans. They are riff with scandal. Oh my God.
Oh my God, you're too much. You're too much.
Well, not right now. It's true. It's true. I mean, wherever you turn, there's something else with these guys. All right, I won't hold you to any of that. If you ask me,
look, I think we say it every week. We're in uncharted waters. I don't know where this is going. I mean, who knows what else can be uncovered, as you said. So let's.
All right, we'll move on to the election.
Don't know.
All right, let's move on to election 2020. Biden jumps in the polls. By the way, is that a backlash to what Trump tried to pull off in Ukraine? Because it was a mighty big jump after the last 5 days. I guess and the poll that I saw, by the way, was after the debate, and I thought he did much better in the debate than, because the press is just beating the crap out of him now. They just don't want him. They hate him. They're doing to him what they did to Hillary in some respects. And hello, but I thought he actually gave a much better. He gave the people what they wanted to hear, apparently, because he bumped up 14 points. He's ahead now. And by the way, I didn't think that Warren did such a hot job. I thought they all made mincemeat out of her at that debate that we didn't get to.
Yeah, she wasn't ready for what she
which was really
for.
bizarre. I mean, really, really badly not ready. And she, by the way, she has no game face, which is another reason she should not be the nominee. Because this is not the first time we've seen her not have a game face and show her fear, her emotion, her I'm caught. Trump did it to her too. So, forgetting her left-wing, ideology that's more further left than I am. But I just thought that I'd raise the point that even though Biden is hurting in the money department, he's hanging in there. And nobody can catch him with the African-American vote or.
Yeah, so far.
So far, so good. So, but Iowa's its own fluky little weird laboratory. So you never know. So let me tell you about Iowa. Guess who's ahead in Iowa? Who's up in the? I think 6. I think he's right up there with the second tier. Yeah, big. Who was up? Pete? Steve Bullock. Oh, I forgot about your man. Steve Bullock is polling very high in Iowa. He's parked himself there, and he's doing really well. Go figure. Have you gotten him on the show yet? No, because I don't talk about what's going on in my life on air, except I haven't been. I've been kind of right. But someday, I hope at some point. I need to get him on the show. I will work on that. After part 2. So, but yeah, so he's doing off the debate stage, but not forgotten. Yeah, but he's getting the attention of those who need to get the attention. Okay, a couple of quick things I wanted to address. I know you wanted to talk about Buttigieg, and like I said, he can rise, honey. He can make lots and lots of money, but he can't get the African American vote. It certainly seems that way. Yeah. So, hello. I wanted to just, we need a Hillary moment here. I'm very upset that she was more or less cleared in the email scandal, which got virtually no play. Yes, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's totally believable. And it's outrageous that, people who wrote endlessly about the emails. I want a list of who were the ones who made the biggest case and wrote the most articles. Well, I think the New York Times is really ahead of them. Was really out there, yeah. Yeah, and I bring them. Jeffrey Toobin, CNN, God bless him. He's the only one who said, "Oh, yeah, mea culpa, apologize." I think the New York Times did write an editorial, but it didn't get the kind of play that it should have gotten. It was interesting to me that happened, and at the same point, Hillary comes up and she goes after Tulsi Gabbard, and I thought that was really fascinating. But I didn't get what she was up to there. Do you know what she was up to there? I have no special insight. I think my guess is she's still carrying around a lot of rage, justifiable anger about the election and the Russians, and or a warning, or a warning.
or warning. Yeah.
And
some
people laughed it off. Yeah, and some people laughed it off. And I don't think it should have been laughed off because already Facebook is telling us the Russians are doing it again.
Absolutely.
And the Republicans, back to our Republicans, refused to pass any legislation that would put a stop to this.
Absolutely.
So is it a silly question to say that, all of this, with my friend Steve Bullock and Buttigieg can't get the black vote and Biden, jumping in the polls, except he can't get the money, and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie, taking some of the stuff, and the Democrats wringing their hands right now because they say, we have 19 people or 20 or something out there, but nobody's good enough, and oh my God, what are we going to do? Hillary going to throw her hat back in the ring?
No. I just don't think there's any kind of real demand. Maybe, I don't see any demand in the party for it, I don't think at any point in the last 2 years there's been a real demand from grassroots or Democratic politicians or money people or others to say she should run again, that she was robbed, that she would have been a great president, that this is crazy, there's an injustice to be fixed, and she should run and could win. I think, if anything, people have been too dismissive of her and said she should shut up and disappear.
I just thought I'd have. So yeah,
I think she's. Yeah, I don't see it.
But you never know.
You got to go back to 1956 for the last time someone was, lost and then was nominated again when Adlai Stevenson did. I just think kind of those days are over.
Well, I also don't think that I don't think a woman could be on the ticket and be number one, including Elizabeth Warren. I just don't think that. I hate to say it, but I don't think that that's going to get. That person would not get elected.
I do actually think Al Gore should have run, but that's my own weird little.
Well, how interesting. That's really weird that you said
prophetic on the environment.
No. I had the same thought.
Yeah.
I had the same thought.
Anti-Iraq war.
Just a cool guy in his own way.
Yeah. Tech savvy, but not a Facebook
geek.
Supplicant.
Right. Supplicant is a better word.
Who actually, if our politics were better, he would have gotten another look.
So Bloomberg says he may throw in his hat in the ring. I don't know. Look, I said it to you a couple of months ago. I'm going to say it again. I'm not totally thrilled with who the Democrats have.
Except for Steve Bullock.
Except I think Steve. Well, and that's an unusual case because that's a story. He could write a story. He could be a story candidate. In other words, you could write, he's the galloping on the white horse, galloping in from Montana.
Well, there's always the myth of the white knight.
Right.
But yeah.
He could do it. If they were smart, he's not smart enough, obviously, because if he were, he would be there already doing that role. I'd like to talk to his campaign and tell them how they could quickly bring him right to the fore because he's cute too. But, nobody these days, I don't know, not good enough. But they really don't have a great, I'm sorry. Biden stands out because he can bring normalcy back, and that would be lovely. But honestly, that if that had been 5 years ago, it would have been better. I just don't think it's a great bunch of people running. I just don't see any stars there. And Trump is a star. He's a rotten star. He's a star. So that concerns me. I still, we got to wait to see, but I'm really concerned. But a lot can change, as you said, and so I leave you sort of on this one, which is, remember that anonymous thing that senior Trump administration official wrote in the New York Times last year? Well, this guy's got, or this woman, we don't know who she is, has got a new book coming out.
Yeah, kind of fascinating publishing gimmick, right? A big anonymous book.
I didn't see who was publishing it.
Primary colors.
Did you see who was publishing it? The writer should know these things. I didn't. I just never got around to looking to see. I'd like to know who it was. Was it 12. A Judith Regan? Oh, it was 12.
It was 12. An imprint of Hachette. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. It's a big publisher, big contract, big agents.
We have a lot of their people on the show here, so we love 12.
Big agents, yeah. No, it's a serious, endeavor. It's it's a little gimmicky, but,
It's gimmicky. A lot of people are saying whoever it is should have done what the whistleblower did. And they're kind of beating up on this person, whoever it is.
Well, who knows? Maybe they'll take off their mask while doing the book tour. They'll do the book tour behind a screen.
No, or who the Clinton, the Nixon character.
Right.
We find out.
Deep Throat, right. It'll only be in parking garages.
Right. We'll only find that out, years later or whatever. I don't know. I just, oh my God. So in the scheme of it all, as we close down this week's show, and thank you for sharing my birthday with me part of the day.
Happy birthday, Halli.
It really is lovely.
You're
to have
amazing.
You here.
You're great.
Amazing.
And
you're amazing.
And I hope you get a little time to celebrate today.
I do. But when we leave, so here we are, a week, whatever it is. What do you are you waiting for some shoe to drop, or you think something's going to happen? What are your instincts telling you we should all be looking for in the next week or so?
Oh, I guess just more about this Ukraine thing, but it's Trump land, so you never know what it could be.
So it could be.
You just don't know.
Could be. You got there where you need to go. Well, what I'm saying, I think Melania is going to come into the news soon. That's all I'm going to say on that. I'm going to leave you hanging.
Ooh, I like that one. Okay.
All right. That's it, darling.
All right.
We're good to go. Goodbye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
You were listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasserjayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device, too. Just say, the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at the Halli CJ Show. Are leaders born or made? Where does ambition come from? How does adversity affect the growth of leadership? Does the leader make the times, or do the times make the leader? In her #1 New York Times bestseller, Leadership in Turbulent Times, now out in paperback, Doris Kearns Goodwin combines her signature storytelling with essential lessons from 4 of our nation's presidents: Abraham Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Lyndon B. Johnson. Kearns Goodwin writes that no common pattern describes the trajectory of leadership. Although set apart in background, abilities, and temperament, these men shared a fierce ambition and a deep-seated resilience that enabled them to surmount uncommon adversity. At their best, all 4 were guided by a sense of moral purpose. And then there was Donald Trump. Leadership, moral purpose, a thing of the past? Let's talk with the author of Leadership in Turbulent Times, Doris Kearns Goodwin. We begin with my needling my good friend and lover of the Boston Red Sox about my New York Yankees, who a week later went on to lose the race for the pennant. Hi, Doris.
Hi, how are you?
I'm terrific. It's so nice to have you back on the show. I think the last time we talked...
Me too. I was glad when I saw your name. This is perfect.
It's great. We can talk baseball for exactly 1 second, and I can just say to you, whoa, New York Yankees. Red Sox, not so much.
Okay, I will take it. I'm very mature now. It's fine.
So you know what? It's a great intro, though, because I was thinking about Aaron Boone, and I was thinking leadership, and here we go. Happy with leadership when we turn to politics, though, in these turbulent times? That's a whole new conversation. I want to start with this, Doris. Does the leader make the times, or do the times make the leader? Can we look at that from a historical perspective?
Well, there's no question that the times create the urgency or the desire for a certain demand of type of a leader. When you think about FDR, for example, he had already shown leadership of the Depression in New York State, and there was a sense on the part of the people that he recognized the difficulties of the problems, that he had an optimistic temperament, that he had taken hold of the problem in New York. So the times called for such a man. And he had been through polio. He'd had his own depression, his own paralysis, and they knew that. And he could deal with people to whom fate had dealt an unkind hand. And then the experience of that helped him in World War II. So I think the times create the demand for a leader. And sometimes that leader's the right person for the right time, and sometimes they're not. I mean, Hoover was there before FDR. Buchanan, one of the worst presidents, was there before Lincoln. So it depends on whether or not the person gets an opportunity to be a great leader and leave a legacy when there's a crisis, but they could also become a great failure.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it. I know you worked on this book for a long time, and we're now into the paperback edition. Thank God, I love it. Can we just talk about why this book now? This is sort of a departure in some way for you. I was so excited when it came out. Why'd you do it, and why'd you do it now?
Well, I think I did it because I knew that each time I moved from one president to another, it takes me so long to write about these presidents, longer than World War II to write about FDR, 10 years about Lincoln, that I'd have to pick somebody that I was going to spend another 10 years with, possibly. And I realized that each time I moved from one president to the other, I felt like I was leaving the other guy behind, like leaving an old boyfriend behind. Mm-hmm. So I figured, what if I just keep the four I know the best together? So this was 6 years ago. They all were in turbulent times. That's why I got the title, not because I predicted what would be feeling today, and just looked at them through the lens of leadership. It was always in the other books, but not in the forefront. And it's what I've always been interested in since graduate school. You know, where does ambition come from? You know, how do the times make the man, or are leaders born or made? So I just went back to those four guys and delved deeper into them and saw their contrasts and their similarities. So it was fun. It was really fun. I had no idea when I started that I'd enjoy the whole process intellectually and emotionally as much as I did.
And powerful. I must tell you, this is very powerful. And again, in a different way than I'm used to from you. You know me, your number one fan. You know, let me talk to you about this. To say this country is in turmoil, I think is an understatement. But let's do a little perspective here, because I've heard you talk about the book now for the last week or so. You don't think these are the worst of times. And maybe that's fair. Maybe it's not. Where does it fit if it's not the worst of times?
Well, I mean, it certainly feels like a very troubling time. There's no question about that. So there's nothing to downplay that. I guess it's just because I know what it was like when Lincoln took office and the House is on fire, essentially. The country split. A civil war is going to leave 600,000 soldiers dead. And he said if he'd ever known what he would face during his first months in office, he wouldn't have thought he could have lived through it. I know what it was like for Teddy Roosevelt when there seemed to be widespread talk of a coming revolution because of the Industrial Revolution. It had shaken up the economy, and like globalization has done today, big companies swallowing small companies and people in this country feeling split off from people in the city. And there was violence in the land. There were anarchist bombings. And of course, when FDR takes over, he's not even sure he'll be able to take the oath of office before the country and the banks were going to collapse. So it does give you perspective to know we've been through very hard times before, and the combination of the right leader and the citizens being active. In each one of those cases, Lincoln said it was the anti-slavery movement that did it all, not him. It was the progressive movement that helped FDR and Teddy Roosevelt and the civil rights movement for LBJ. So if we just take hold as a country and figure out why the system doesn't seem to be working, not just for this leader, but for the system in general, then I have confidence that we'll get through this.
Hey, I've gotten, I think, 4 questions and I haven't named the T word. I don't mean Teddy Roosevelt. I mean Trump. For me, that was pretty good, I got to tell you. Let's do this. There is Teddy Roosevelt, and then there is Trump. Why do you think we got from Roosevelt to Trump? Do we, as a people, I don't know, not make men like we used to? Ooh, that's an awful thing to say. But
no, it isn't, I think. No, I mean, I think, you know, the big difference, I think if anyone were to come today of my 4 guys and lead us through this tumultuous time, it would be Teddy Roosevelt. Interesting that you've mentioned the 2 T's. Mm-hmm. But the difference is that he had the self-reflection he had the same desire to be in the center of attention that President Trump does. They said he wanted to be the baby at the baptism, the bride at the wedding, and the corpse at the funeral. And he was pretty arrogant when he first started, but he then learned that you can't do it alone. You know, he realized he had a swelled head. He understood that the country was divided, and yet he was somehow able to have a square deal for the rich and the poor, you know, the capitalist and the wage worker. And he was fiery. You know, he had whatever you would have taken to do Twitter today. You know, speak softly and carry a big stick. Don't hit until you have to. But the difference was that he was really trying from the time you get in there to expand his base, So he'd take a train and he'd go to all around the country 6 weeks in the spring and the fall, just talking to people, listening to their complaints, listening to newspaper, and he made friends with the newspaper people rather than having them their enemies. They were important for him to investigate the corruption in the cities and the country. So, that same quality of commanding attention, which may be a necessity in today's crazy world of social media, he would have had, but toward a common purpose.
You just said a word that's very interesting to me, particularly considering what I do for a living. Listening. That seems to be what's not going on here. There's a big gap, right?
No, I mean, he was just going to these different places that had not necessarily been for him, and he would invite journalists, even when they criticized him, to come in, and he would listen to them. There's a famous case of when he wrote his memoir about the Spanish-American War, and a famous journalist wrote a memoir of it and said he so made himself the center of every battle in the war, he should have called the book Alone in Cuba. And then what does he do? He writes a letter to the guy saying, I regret to tell you my wife and my friends adore your criticism of my book, so now you owe me one. I want to meet you. And they became friends. The journalist could still criticize him. He could still criticize the journalist, but he knew that they had to work together in publicizing the corruption of the country at the time and make people want to act against it.
I want to take it a little bit further than that, and I want to say that if you take a guy like Trump, where we are today, I don't think he listens. He defines. He creates. And everybody seems to respond to him versus he listening to what the people really want. What people?
No, there's no question that the most important quality when you get in is to expand your empathy, your understanding of other people and their different points of view, the people who didn't vote for you as well as the people who did. And that can only be had by truly listening, not just by going out and talking to those people and finding out why they were against you or why they still don't think you're doing a good job. And then you can grow through self-reflection. But if instead you stay in that lane where you already have the people's voice, then there's no way of making the country come together.
So let's put it in terms of caring and also add some other characteristics of leadership. And it's interesting to me that I think there might be certain essential qualities. But as I was reading, they all came to their own leadership skills in different ways and differently.
That's correct. I mean, the journey to their leadership can be very different. Some of them suffered a really difficult crisis when they were young. Obviously, Lincoln had to be persevering from the time he was little, just trying to eke out a living and get an education, which his parents didn't think were important for him since he should just be working on the farm. Teddy Roosevelt lost his wife and his mother on the same day when his wife was dying in childbirth and his mother died of typhoid fever. FDR had his polio. LBJ had a massive heart attack when he was in 40s. All of those difficulties, I think, made them stronger. Ernest Hemingway once said, everyone is broken by life, but afterwards some people are stronger in the broken places. One went through, the Congress, as LBJ did especially. Teddy went through executive governorship, as did FDR. Lincoln just went from 4 single terms in the state legislature and 1 term in Congress, and yet had the qualities of a leader that would have shown wherever he was. So it's really interesting to see the different paths and how they were vulnerable in the early days. That's what I was trying to make young people reading the book realize, that it wasn't foreordained that they'd end up on Mount Rushmore, that's for sure.
Right. And I'm sure to some of them they were greatly surprised.
Yes, indeed.
As they went to the good maker, like, how did that happen? Oh my gosh. But yeah, it's true. Can we talk that? You brought up the word humility. God, that's just, I don't know, politicians' humility. That's another lane I want to go down with you. Are our politicians different today? Now it's a career, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not a calling?
You do. No, you do have a feeling now, because maybe people looking at entering politics who might have had that larger calling are questioning whether they want to go into it, because you're so concerned with having to raise money to go home and dial for dollars. You realize that they haven't been able to get along in Washington for a long period of time, so what legacy are you going to leave behind? Your private lives are going to be exposed in a way that they wouldn't have been before. So the class of people that are now there's obviously some good people there, but they've lost the habit, in a certain sense, of coming together and producing something they can be proud of as congressmen or senators, as presidents. And they don't seem to have that same ambition for self having become an ambition for the greater good, which is the essential thing if you're going to become a really good leader. Instead, it feels like they're running around so much for themselves rather than for that greater good. They can't even define what the greater good is right now.
And let's bring up moral purpose.
Bring up moral purpose. Indeed, FDR said that the presidency is primarily a place of moral leadership. And the one thing when Tolstoy was giving a talk about Abraham Lincoln, he said, primarily, why is he remembered? Why was he so great? Not as great a general as Napoleon, great as statesman as Frederick the Great, but his greatness consisted in his character and the moral fiber of his being. That's the ultimate standard for judging our leaders.
Yeah, and a great standard it is. If you go back to, we were just talking about before about, there's this pledge allegiance to the party now. Is that
right?
Is that new to this generation, or?
Well, it is new to this generation. I mean, it certainly was the case in the 19th century when your party was a big part of your identity. It was part of your sporting events. You went to the party activities as if you would go to a great football game today. They'd be yelling, hit him again, harder, harder. And then the national newspapers came along, and then national radio, and then the 3 television networks. And now somehow party identification has become much more intense than it was before. There was a recent article that people are worried more now about their kid marrying outside their party than their religion. And that intensity of that feeling of one party versus the other, one section of the country versus the other, is really different from it was in the 70s, 60s, 50s. Partly, I think, in some ways in Congress in those earlier years, 3/4 of the congressmen and senators had been in World War II or the Korean War, so they knew what it was like to have a common purpose across all these lines. And now there are more veterans in this Congress than before. The last midterms brought more women in than before. So there's room for hope. There were longer lines for people to vote. If the citizens get active, anything created by man, as Roosevelt said, can be solved by man. We can change the political structure. We can do something to get money out of politics. We can do something to change congressional boundaries to make it less likely. But all those, it's like a political revolution is needed in the country in order to change our system to make it better able to reflect people's ability to get together.
Remember truth, justice, and the American way? What happened to truth?
I do. What happened to truth? And without truth and agreement on facts, then it gets much harder when you can have 2 competing narratives going on, as if each one were true, and only one may have the truth in it. Yeah. You can fight about opinions, but if you don't agree on facts, it's really difficult to lead.
And isn't that where we are right now? I mean, everybody's playing with truth. There is no truth.
I think that's right.
I mean, there is a truth.
I mean, right now. No, there is a truth.
But there is no truth.
The concern for the country should be if 2 competing narratives go about impeachment right now, and one group of people feels one narrative is truthful and the other ones feel the other narrative is truthful, then the end of this process is very hard to imagine, like it was with Nixon. When the Nixon impeachment almost took place and he resigned, there was a generalized feeling on Republicans and Democrats that it was time for Nixon to go. And then Ford was able to stand up and said our long national nightmare is over. That's what you have to hope somehow, that however this goes, that the country is educated in such a way that public sentiment is recognizing, if it does, that this is necessary to happen. If instead we find 2 different camps at the other end where nothing has changed except the feeling that this was partisan, then it's only going to deepen the divisions in the country. So the job of the Congress, if it's going to do it well, if they're going to do this impeachment, is to educate the country as to why what President Trump is doing is against the ideals of the country. And if they can't provide a story that you can tell to your neighbor or your colleague at the bar as to why this is necessary, then I think the problems of the country will only be deepened.
You're right. They need an elevator speech. The Democrats have been screaming that. They need to hire somebody to write the perfect elevator speech for them. If you were to bring back, let me just throw out Teddy Roosevelt because he's one of my favorites, and he was looking at this, what would he be saying if he was seeing what's going on?
I think Teddy is interesting you mentioned him. I think he's the right person for this time because the problems created by the Industrial Revolution were so similar to the problems created by globalization and the tech revolution, the country being split, gap between the rich and the poor, working class feeling they weren't being fairly treated. He was a fiery guy who could speak to both sides. Square deal for the rich and the poor, the capitalist and the laborer. And he also knew how to speak in these short, pithy statements. He'd be great on Twitter. There's no question. Speak softly and carry a big stick. even gave Maxwell House the slogan, good to the very last drop. And he was a fighter. He was a fighter, but he fought for the country. I mean, he fought for bringing these, for these exploitations of the industrial order. He wanted to soften them. He fought against corruption. He fought for the big companies to be broken up if they weren't treating people fairly and treating competition fairly. I can just see him running around right now. But he had experience, too, that he would have been bringing to the job. He had been police commissioner. He'd been civil service commissioner. He'd been a governor. He'd been a vice president. He'd been a soldier in the army. He'd been a state legislator. So he knew every level of government by the time he got to the presidency. He'd know how to mobilize the entire thing.
Oh, to have a president who would inspire again. Wouldn't that be lovely?
Oh, I think it would be great.
I mean, you and I are old enough to know what that's like. There are an awful lot of kids who just have no clue. It's really a shame. I got to ask you about this as well. And if you look at Donald Trump historically at this point, which is hard to do, but, let's put our hats on that word. Is he the best or the worst of the presidents we ever had? Or where do you put him at this juncture? Well, I don't think he's going to change. But.
Well, that's the question. I mean, I think when he first came in was the question of will he be able to grow through this experience? And will he be able to learn from the early mistakes that were made in the early part of the presidency? And in fact, he seemed to promise at the beginning he was going to put people around him who could question him when those generals were up for their hearings and they disagreed with him. This is great, he said. But then that hasn't happened. They've been leaving. He's now surrounded more by the people who agree with him, who voice his point of view. And unless you can grow in office, especially if you come in with no public experience. I mean, he's the only one who hasn't had military or public experience, so he needed people around him who had more experience. And it just feels like it's become more of an echo chamber than that reaching out to your team of rivals that Lincoln and even FDR was able to have Eleanor there as his, welcome thorn in his side, as he said. And you worry who is that person for President Trump that can speak truth to him, which every leader needs. I mean, Lincoln had Seward, FDR had Eleanor and Harry Hopkins, and that's a critical quality that you need when you're in that position of power.
Optimistic or pessimistic? Are we doomed? Can this be fixed? You got
Absolutely.
30 seconds. What'd you say?
Absolutely, it can be fixed. It is just, you have to be optimistic. If you're not, then you are doomed. And as long as the citizens begin to realize their responsibility, they become more active, they get into politics, they try to change things at the local, state, and then national level. We've come through worse times before. That's what history will tell us, and we'll come through this somehow. It's not easy to see how now, but I bet we will.
Doris, you need to run for president. What a great leader. You always lead us down the right path.
I'm not sure of that, but I'd love to have somebody that I could know that would be there and we could talk. That would be so great.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Thank you. Great
You are welcome.
Always
Take
nice
care.
to talk to you. Bye-bye. I've been speaking with Doris Kearns Goodwin. Her book is the #1 New York Times bestseller, Leadership in Turbulent Times. Now available in paperback, available at fine bookstores everywhere. Thank you for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec, LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, and is available at hallicasserjayne.com and on all your favorite apps. Be sure to visit us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and follow me on Twitter at The Halli CJ Show. Until next time, this is Halli Casser-Jayne.